Good afternoon. My name is Prince Eckerson, and I am going to briefly discuss some things pertaining to program design for wrestlers. First, we're going to go over basically how wrestling meets work. Then, we're going to go over the 7 laws of training as they pertain to wrestling. After that, we're going to be discussing what is required of wrestling physically, mentally, psychologically, and then finally we're going to get into the program itself. First and foremost, how wrestling meets work. Okay, basically there are 3 periods, and depending on whether it's folk style wrestling, freestyle, high school or collegiate, it could either be anywhere from 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes per period. I believe in college, it's 3 minutes for the first period and 2 minutes for the other periods after that. Basically, the wrestlers must be conditioned for all-out physical exertion because of those short period bouts. And the aim is to outscore your opponents with takedowns, escapes, or just pinning the opponent. If you pin your opponent, you win 6 points for the team. If you get a takedown, meaning you take your opponent to the ground, and get a near fall, which is where you almost pin them, that's 2 points. If you escape your opponent's takedown attempt on you, that's 1 point. All that's calculated. All right, more on weight classes. Now, usually wrestling is divided into weight classes. You have categories such as 132 pounds, and I believe the heavyweight is anywhere from 215 pounds up to 275 pounds. That's the upper limit for heavyweights. And there might be some slight variances depending on the type of wrestling, but in general, those weight classes tend to be pretty fixed. Every wrestler has to do what is called making weight before the meet, meaning that they must weigh under the limit for their weight class. If they don't make weight, then there's something called scratch weight, where they must remove more items of their clothing to ensure that they make weight. But usually wrestlers make weight. And unfortunately, some wrestlers partake in some unhealthy means to make weight. They might cut water drastically and exercise and sweat profusely before the meet in order to make that happen. Okay, so 7 laws of strength training as they relate to wrestling. Number 1, joint mobility. Of course, wrestlers have to have joint mobility, considering the type of throws, takedowns, and maneuvers that they partake in, as well as what they must do to escape the pins and the holds. So that's how it pertains to Law 1, joint mobility. Law 2 involves ligament and tendon strength. Now, there isn't a whole lot of information on training the ligaments and the tendons. However, in general, ligaments and tendons tend to strengthen with basic strength training. As you train your muscles for strength, your ligaments and tendons also will develop as well. Law 3, develop core strength. Now, wrestlers must have strong core muscles, the muscles of their abdominals and their lower backs. But what is really key for wrestlers is the development of the hip muscles, because usually where a wrestler's hips go is where their bodies go, and if you can control the hips of your opponent, you can essentially control them. So bridging exercises, thoracic bridge exercises, abdominal exercises, lower back exercises, would help with this. Law 4, develop the stabilizers. Wrestling is a dynamic sport, and as I said, it involves pure all-out physical exertion. So they're constantly changing position, and they're constantly using their stabilizers to lift, toss, throw, escape, or try to jockey for control. So they must develop the stabilizers, and the best way to do that is by training actual free weights. Law 5, train movements, not muscles. Now, something like training muscles in isolation would be good for bodybuilding, but for wrestling, wrestlers use a lot of compound movements. They use a lot of multi-joint movements. So things like double leg takedowns not only involve the lower body when they get into that position, which is like a lunge, but it also involves core stability to keep themselves upright for that takedown attempt, as well as strength in the back to pull the leg or legs of their opponent for the takedown, for the single or double leg takedown. So it's essential that they train the movements that can carry over to movements that they do in the gym. Law 6, focus on what is necessary, not on what is new, which pretty much goes in line with the previous law, Law 5. Focus on what's essential. So basic compound multi-joint movements are necessary for wrestling, and whatever exercises that a coach can think of that can help carry over to wrestling moves. The best way to train for wrestling is to wrestle. However, wrestling itself should not be the only means of training. Law 7, periodize strength for the long term. Now, obviously, strength is important for wrestling, as it is needed to control the opponent. However, there should be times where they increase the intensity and the volume and then level off a little bit and deload in an active rest phase so that they can recover properly and then make progress over the long term. Now, progressive overload in wrestling. There's the story of Milo of Croton. Whether it's fictional or not, it's besides the point. The bottom line is, as legend would have it, he was a Greek wrestler who would take a newborn calf and pick it up every single day. And as that calf grew in size, Milo grew in size and strength. And this illustrates the idea that strength or any facet of fitness should be developed progressively, steadily, and slowly. Had Milo tried to pick up the calf halfway, he probably wouldn't have been able to do it. So, as with programming, wrestlers should develop and progress slowly and ramp up the intensity and or volume and or load in order to progress and get better. And for this particular program I have wrestlers doing strength and conditioning only 2 times a week, because the mat drills and the live wrestling sessions are what they do 5 days a week. And I think too many sessions in strength and conditioning would just add too much volume, and it would be overkill and overtraining for the athletes. It's more important for them to focus on drilling skills and actually getting better at wrestling. The strength and conditioning really is there just to supplement their strength and their conditioning. So I'm just going to kind of go over it real quick a little bit. So the long story short of it is, if you can kind of see it right here, they're only going to be doing 2 days a week, and it's going to involve a push and a pull day. In the anatomical adaptation phase, they're going to be doing low weight, low loads, and if need be, body weight exercises just to acclimate themselves to exercise in general, and then transition into the wrestling season. And I've seen this as a coach and as an athlete, a wrestling coach and a wrestling athlete. All too often, too many athletes make the mistake of wrestling during the wrestling season and then not doing anything for 6 to 9 months out of the year, and then they come back to the wrestling season, come back to the wrestling, thinking that they can gain the same level of conditioning that they had in the previous season, and thinking that they could just drop 20 to 30 pounds within a matter of weeks. And it doesn't work out that way. That increases the likelihood of injury, and it hinders performance. The power phase is going to be 2 times a week. And the percentage of the 1 rep maximums is going to be week 1, 85%, week 2, 85%, week 3, 90%, and then week 4 as a deload where they lift 50% of their 1 rep maxes. These are all percentages of their 1 rep maxes for each of these lifts. As with all strength training programs, strength and conditioning programs, athletes should engage in a light warm-up and dynamic stretch to acclimate their bodies to the strength training session. This is to be done also for their sparring sessions and their mat drills. And then after the sparring sessions, mat drills, or strength and conditioning sessions, then they partake in a cool down. So that's basically it. I know I might have gone a little bit over the 10-minute mark, but hope you enjoyed that, and good luck to you and happy training. We're out.